We know that AI helps us work faster and more efficiently, but what if it could also help us live longer, healthier lives? We want to introduce you to Interconnected, a fascinating new podcast about the tech behind the tech. This week, they dive into the revolution that AI is bringing to medicine. In episode 2, world-renowned cardiologist Dr. Eric Topol and decentralized pioneer Jim Nasser explain how AI is enhancing disease prevention, supercharging personalized care, and giving patients control of their data. Listen to Interconnected today, wherever you get your podcasts.
Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to the Cloudcast. We're coming to you live from our massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. And it is Aaron. And a quick intro this week. I hope everyone out there is doing well. And we are approaching fall conference season. I don't know about y'all, but I've got a pretty full agenda this fall and really looking forward to it. Our show this week is kind of a throwback, if you will, to bare metal. And we've been talking about bare metal off and on, and certainly talking about bare metal in the context of Kubernetes and containers for a while now. But AI workloads and digital sovereignty and some of these other areas that are, emerging trends, but also have been kind of sitting under the surface and kind of lurking there for a little while. And so we're going to explore that a little bit today, of this resurgence and potentially this return of bare metal. And for that conversation, we're going to be talking to Todd Robinson, founder and president of OpenMetal.io. And Brian and Todd discuss this resurgence of bare metal, especially in the context of AI workloads, digital sovereignty, and really, companies are sometimes reassessing those public cloud economics as well. This conversation really explores how organizations are finding those costs and control advantages in bare metal solutions, particularly for long-running applications. And all of that is coming up right after this break.
Today's show is brought to you by TestCube. Testing applications in Kubernetes doesn't have to be complicated. TestCube is your go-to platform for cloud-native continuous testing. With TestCube, you can orchestrate, scale, and automate tests effortlessly right within Kubernetes, catching issues early and deploying with confidence. Try it out today and see why engineering teams trust TestCube to keep their testing simple and scalable. Your test, your tools, your infrastructure, finally together. Check it out at testcube.io/cloudcast. And we're back. And folks, one of the topics that Aaron and I have been talking about a bunch on the side as we, get into what feels like, kind of a reemergence of a lot of topics, whether it is, people looking to acquire GPUs, whether it's, conversations around data sovereignty, whether it's, repatriating applications out of the public cloud, or even just, looking at alternatives to virtualization is, where are we with, a topic that, we talked about a lot a few years ago, which is bare metal and the ability to have complete control over your applications, to be able to really think about, what do the economics of what you're doing look like. And so very, very excited to have Todd Robinson, who is founder and president of OpenMetal, joining us today. Todd, welcome to the show. Great to have you on.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. I'm glad to be here, and hopefully I can shine some light on what's going on in the bare metal world. And then, of course, in our case, we run lots of bare metal, but also run automated private cloud. And so, I think we should be able to get through some interesting topics today.
Yeah, awesome. Well, before we jump into it, give us a little bit of your background, because you have been around this space for a while in different incarnations. But tell us a little about your background, and then kind of what brought about your passion for, running, hosted private services, bare metal technology, all those sort of things.
Yeah, sure. So I'm from many years ago. Yeah, so I'm back in the 2000 era when I first got started, and one of the mothership companies, which actually is still happily running today, many years in, 25 years in, I guess it is now, is a company called InMotion Hosting, and we've been always running our own servers and our own data centers ever since the beginning. At least the data centers. Building our own is a slightly different challenge. Yeah, for sure. But so yeah, lots of experience, both in the hardware world, the data center space, and then all the way up to stack to dealing with end customers. And part of our system at InMotion was a set of really large scale open source systems, definitely for managing deployments of bare metal, but then also to convert that into cloud resources. And so we've been actually running a lot of these open source systems for many, many years. And so about 5-6 years ago, we realized that the systems that we were actually using at InMotion were applicable to several other use cases. And so we started down a journey to spin out the technology into something called OpenMetal, which I got the shirt for today.
Yeah, awesome.
And essentially lets us trivially both manage bare metal deployments and really large networks that go with the bare metal deployments, but also to supply private clouds that are like completely autonomous private clouds, kind of your own mini AWS for companies. Yeah. And so, yeah, lots of experience also, just building software and some of our other businesses that we're in. And so, yeah, it was like a really great combination to kind of get to put together our software building with our data center, like grassroots, like all the way down at the fundamental level, that part of our business. So yeah, that's did that cover what you were thinking about?
That's perfect. We love a good origin story, and then it's always interesting to see where, as people evolve, what part of the business they're still passionate about. Is it the technology? Is it the intersection with business? And so yeah, the fact that you've been running this for a while, you've learned certain things, you're looking to sort of pass that along to customers is fantastic. As I mentioned in the opening, it feels like there are so many things that are now starting to come around, kind of back from, the hype of public cloud does everything for everything. And again, whether it's, people that are looking to acquire GPUs through hosting providers, whether it's, kind of all the different sort of digital sovereignty or isolated environments, or, all the things we talk about. Give us a sense right now of it feels like there's a lot of use cases, or, kind of a renewal of use cases. Where is the private cloud, bare metal, sort of isolated environments? Where is that market space right now? And what's sort of changing and evolving in that space?
There's a lot of things that kind of came together at the same time, actually, for us. So one is there is this underlying, like, constant increase in consumption of digital things like this. So, you always kind of think like, oh, there's going to be a tapering off of it. And then, AI comes around the corner and you're like, whoa, everybody's consuming so many of these resources. So I think that's just a fact that we have. Maybe at some point in this world, they'll reach a point where there's like, all right, X amount of digital resources are available per person. But luckily the systems are getting more and more efficient, et cetera. But it still continues to happen. So there's a driver for sure of just greater and greater need for these resources. And then another item coming together is as companies got into the cloud and they really got more used to being cloud native, they also realized that as they have made that their home, this cloud native space, they realized, hey, look, I'm constantly in there. I'm in there at a relatively straightforward, kind of almost steady state usage pattern. And of course, that makes sense as organizations get bigger and bigger, or use cases become more mature. Instead of having this like, oh, I got to scale tomorrow by 1,000%, which is wonderful about the public cloud, particularly like the hyperscalers. That's a great attribute, and there's some of the things that I like myself personally, I love about public cloud. But after you've been in it for a while and you have a steady state use case, you kind of go, well, how come I'm paying for the ability to scale like crazy when I don't do that? Right. And so that's one of the things that have come around where companies have realized, look, I'm looking at my AWS bill and I go from, $95,000 a month to 100. and to 95 to 100 to 95 to 100. You're not going 95 to 0.
Right.
So now your problem really is 95,000 a month. So you have this kind of awareness now that's taking root with companies that say, hey, actually, I don't need the cloud like that. So that's happening. You're also seeing the changes that Broadcom made with VMware kind of coming together, and companies are now either halfway through their renewal period on their new rates and essentially trying to decide, like, is this worth it for me or not? And many of them, of course, are making the decision to say, look, all right, I'm looking for alternatives now. Yeah. So that's a thing that's happening. Also, some of the use cases are just getting bigger. Like we run sometimes a lot of really large big data platforms, whether from, like giant ClickHouse clusters to Hadoop type stuff or to big transformation Kafka type workloads. Those tend to need really large systems that you really don't need a cloud in the way of. Yeah. And so in that case, you say, give me bare metal. Those systems, I'll pick on ClickHouse just because we have a wonderful customer, Hunt actually.io is their name is. They have these systems that are resilient and smart and can manage themselves on the hardware. So you have a system that gives you the HA-ness that you're often depending on the cloud for. And so there's a lot of those mature systems, and these use cases are getting bigger. Yeah. So you see a lot of the big bare metal use cases being pretty common now.
Okay.
Yeah. Did I get to some of those?
Yeah. No, it makes a ton of sense, and it was again kind of, as I said, we'd been talking about it and kind of feeling like, okay, we need to kind of go explore it because it feels like there's more and more of that in the economics of it. It feels like kind of after COVID, there was obviously a big push. People had to move out of their data centers or move stuff out because you physically couldn't go there. And then there feels like there's been a real reckoning or a rationalization of like, we don't hear AWS talking about price cuts anymore. We haven't for many years. People, we're like, why am I backing things up 5x copies in Snowflake and a bunch of stuff like that? And it does feel like there was, kind of an awakening of, I need to figure out what the economics of my cloud use look like. Because like you said, there are going to be some aspects of your business that have wild fluctuations for good reasons or for bad reasons or for seasonality or whatever. But the majority of what you do tends to be relatively steady state because you figure it out and it starts to run your business. It makes you profitable. Are you seeing more and more of that sort of economic, understanding, kind of awareness, maybe than you did, just a couple of years ago because people were getting the bills. They were, the economy has kind of gone through various ups and downs. Like, are you seeing more awareness from people, or at least, kind of pushing on that lever more than some of the technology pieces?
Yes, for sure. And I kind of see it in two ways that became kind of clear to us. One of them is people got used to cloud native ease, so, hey, call this API, I get this resource, go in here, I get a private something or other, I get my network. And so it became almost not so valuable because it's actually relatively easy to get now. So AWS, kudos to them, wonderful job early on to provide this ease of use that others weren't at the time. But now that everybody is kind of used to that API first or that cloud native, everybody has it. So the value there is a little bit different. It's absolutely expected. Like, I want to be able to easily use these things. Yep. But everybody has it now. Right. So that awareness is kind of set root to say, like, hey, if I'm used to running my business, at AWS and I deploy things with Terraform or OpenTofu or something like that, you can just move that anywhere, right? Like at this stage, any of the major cloud providers, us included, you can just do that. So that awareness is now there that, hey, the special sauce is not so special anymore. Yeah. And then what you described is true is once those steady state levels were reached, then a lot, and then the value of the easy automation for like rapid development became not such a competitive advantage. Then the company's got to start asking themselves, wait a minute, if especially like SaaS companies, you'll see this with is like, if I've got to pay 40% of my top line revenue out, no matter what. And I'm not seeing incremental benefits as I grow. And in fact, some cases the unit cost goes up, which is bizarre. How do I deal with that, right? Like as a SaaS company, you're like, no, I should scale and it'll get cheaper. Well, no, guess what? You scale and it gets more expensive. So yeah, that's the one that we see where the CFO, CTO, CEO has just had enough, where they're like, how was that? It's like, I was supposed to be getting unit economic benefits, scaling benefits, and it didn't materialize. So sometimes you see that coming where it's just, I've had it. And we get those calls sometimes where the VMware one is like, I have had it. We're going to change something. And often it's coming from the top because they've dealt with the complaints or they've dealt with the changes, and the pressures came together where finally the senior people said, all right, that's it. We're making a change.
Right. Yeah. And I feel like there's several of those floating around, right? The VMware one is pretty obvious. People go, I ran a virtualization farm for a while. Now the bill is 2x or 5x. Like, am I getting 5x value? No, you're doing this. You're getting the same thing. I heard somebody the other day say, hey, we finally realized with some of our AI trials that we really shouldn't be thinking in terms of buying tokens. We should be thinking in terms of buying GPUs, because I don't have any idea how many tokens I use, but I can scope what a GPU does, or I can do that. So yeah, I think there's a lot of that kind of recognition coming along. I want to shift topics a little bit, shift gears a little bit. OpenMetal is based on some very core open source technology, Ceph and OpenStack and some others. How important do you find that people care about what those underlying technologies are, or do they question it very much, or is it they just want an SLA, they want to know, like you said, things are self-service, that they can use the automation tools. Like in your from where you interact with customers, like how much does the technology really matter versus what the results and the ease of use are, in that, that part of the business?
Yeah, no, that's it's a great question, because it actually varies, that we've found, based upon the company size and the situation that they're in. So I'll give kind of two examples to maybe be able to relate to the listener. So one of them is large scale companies. Let's say they're running a partial of their own colocation, maybe even own some of their own data centers. We were just talking to a company in this situation where they really do care that it is a public open source system. And it's actually because what we've found is the companies are more willing, now that these systems have become more mature themselves. OpenStack and Ceph. Ceph is a great example. Super mature, super stable, rock solid. And so a lot of the companies with skilled administrators, they can absorb actually the responsibility of running some of these clouds themselves, just following tutorials, using some of the latest AI helpers, to have them script things up. Yeah. And so what we found actually for very large organizations, they'll actually place a portion of their workload with us, and a portion of their workload all running on OpenStack and Ceph stays in their data centers run by their team. And so then in many cases, they're using our platform for development and learning and education, and then also to have access to the expertise that we offer. Okay. And we might only run 30% of their workloads, and they run the other 70% of their workloads distributed around the world or in the data centers that they own. Yeah. So in that case, they are very interested in that. It's OpenStack. It's got solid history. It's very good. Ceph, solid history, very good. Yeah. And expertise available to them. Sure. And so that's in one case where they do care. Then the other one is where they generally care less. This would be someone where they are cloud native. They're coming out of one of the big clouds and they've just decided to have their own cloud. They're really not, to them, it really does. The SLAs matter. For the first use case, the SLAs matter too, but sure. They're more concerned about, hey, is the API great? Can I code against it? Is it trivial to spin these resources up? How do I pay for it? What's my cost structure? Do I get dinged every time I add a little, function and I run a function? So they're concerned about those. But yeah, from technology, they just want us to be able to say, yeah, we chose a good product, and we have the release cycles. We got your back for this parts, and you don't have to worry about that. Yeah. So it varies. I think generally people are happy that it's a publicly mature, public, like you can see it, you can see activity with it, and it's mature. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Makes sense. I want to come back to a comment that you made earlier, where you were talking about, there is a pattern. There are some sort of well-known patterns in which people say, "Hey, this workload is really important, but it's become something that we know what it looks like. We can model it pretty well. It's only got a certain amount of variability or fluctuation to it." Like, have you been able to kind of have a way of describing what that looks like for people, so they can go, "Oh, okay, I can apply what would make sense to bring to OpenMetal, based on these characteristics. It changes this amount, or we've been running it for this long," or like, how do you have a way of framing that up for people?
I'll try. Often you end up in the cost side, because many times that is a pain point.
Okay.
There are definitely workloads that we would stay away from, that we would say, hey, keep that where it is.
Mm-hmm.
But generally, when people decide, hey, look, I'm going to have to re-platform, like I've tried the cloud cost management software, I've tried these like little tweaks to reduce the size of these VMs, or shut that stuff down. So they've often gone through this journey ahead of us, where they have tried to control it using the again, cloud cost management softwares. But typically what happens is, if you open up your bill, it says compute and storage, or compute and manage database, and there's nothing else in there, right? Like, and sometimes it's compute egress, or compute, maybe egress is number 3. And so they come to the realization that if you want to materially affect that single largest one, and it's typically 10x everything else, you're going to have to re-platform that. There's no tweaks that you can do in place. And then when that happens, what we usually do, because typically we're working with companies over years, they don't just go, hey, I'm going to move, a petabyte tomorrow. That actually, doesn't actually happen.
Right.
And so instead they would say, okay, let me look at my development environments, because development environments are typically more portable. They don't have the same requirements as a production environment, but they're important, right? They've got good engineers working on them at a particular time. So what we tend to do is look at workloads that are portable first, and also good bang for the buck. It'll be something where they're like, hey, I rarely even run this thing, but I pay for it all the time.
Yeah.
Well, on the private cloud, or bare metal, but private cloud, this is a applicable thing, is if you're not running it, you get the resources that comes back to your private cloud and could be given out to your other VMs or VPCs, right?
Yeah.
Like, so you don't actually pay at the VM level, you're paying at the hardware level. So your cloud can recover those resources and use those easily. So but generally, you're first looking for portable stuff. You got to look for stuff that's going to give them bang for the buck, like something that's meaningful. Mm-hmm.
Sure. No, it makes sense. And that it sort of leads me into, if you were talking to an established company, they've got a portfolio of things in their data center in the cloud. What how do you start thinking about what's the best way to start moving, and what are some of the metrics they tend to think about in terms of going, okay, this is what success looks like? Is it typically an economic thing? Is it regulations that are driving this? We have to be secure in a certain way. What are some of those first steps, and then what are some of the things they look at that are, visibility of success?
A lot of it's driven from a project process, almost like most of these companies are going to be pretty mature companies with the ones that have large scale resources. Yeah. So they're looking at the project. They're kind of just understanding, like, look, I got a renewal of my AWS like macro contract in 18 months, or my VMware, I'm halfway through. I've got 18 months to get off. And so then they're just looking at, okay, let's go through that process. Okay, I got a team that's going to be handling this. How do we get them introduced to the way that the system works? How do they scope the changes? For straight, many of the actual deployments, they're really not that much different. It's cloud native. The beauty of OpenStack and Ceph and all this, it's cloud native. You just call the API and get your resources. So if the company has provisioned their resources using infrastructure as code techniques, which is pretty common. Maybe you get it 3/4 of the time. Yeah. You just take your API, take your code and point it, instead of pointing it here, you point it there, and then you just got to work out some of the logistics of like what's going to move over the wire, and it needs to stay up, and it'll run part over there, gets replicated over here, and then you just go through the migration process. That's one of the beauties of the kind of this on-demand private cloud is it is a cloud and it functions just like any other cloud would. And so you can utilize those common practices for migration. Sometimes people got to move at the VM layer. And so you actually copy the VM image over and then and bring it back up if it's not like something that's been built. Yeah. Infrastructure as code.
Yeah. So I mean, it very much sounds like you want the automation and self-service that you come to expect out of the public cloud and the things that you like, but you get the sort of certainty of the economics around, you own something, you don't have to, you're not thinking about scale and the uncertainty about what that means, or there's 15 services that you need to put this thing together. I'm curious, I'll leave you with one last question before we wrap it up. There was a time when, especially in some of the early days of cloud, people tried to sort of go, well, there's the cloud and then there's your data center. I know AWS was always adamant about never talking about private cloud. And then there became a little bit of a stigma of, well, that's not really cloud. Because again, like, we talked about, it's not as automated or you can't do it as cheap. Do you find there is any sort of stigma anymore when you talk about things being kind of private cloud, or are people now past all that, and they're focused on, what am I getting? What's the cost of it? Does it help run my business? Are we past that at this point? Do you feel like?
I would say, it depends. I think there still can be the stigma, but then people are so mad, they're like, forget it. I'm buying that private cloud. Yeah. And then they actually realize, particularly with us, we're actually a little more like a public cloud, right? So the private cloud, when you buy it from us, it scales up and down. Like you don't just buy it in its one size. Yeah. You buy the size that you need to move your first tranche of workloads in, and then you hit the button and you get some more servers, it joins in, and your cloud is bigger. And then you move your next one in, and then you buy that tranche and buy those additional boxes, and it makes your cloud bigger. And then over time, you can grow and shrink it based upon what you actually need in there. There's a tiny fundamental size, like only 3 servers to make it like a fundamental cloud. But sometimes people are like, at private cloud, I'm going to have to do a whole bunch more work. And it's it depends. In our case, this is on-demand private cloud in our data center. Yeah. If you're putting it in your data center, you don't have any space, power, gear, racks. Yes, you're going to have to do that. We are not a huge advocate of that unless you still have that skill set as a company. If you have that skill set as a company today, probably great for you. Kudos that you didn't jump too far onto the public cloud bandwagon. But in that case, yes, sometimes we also face this. They think of it as like really monolithic, almost indifferent than the public cloud, versus like when you get a private cloud, all of them are like this, the cloud stacks, even the kind of home lab Proxmox stuff, it's still all sliced up into virtual private clouds. Mm-hmm. So you get a private cloud, but you actually, when you use it, all resources that you give out live inside of a virtual private cloud, just like any other cloud provider. And so it's sometimes you have to reset people to go, hey, well, private cloud is like a base layer, but the construct is the same as any other cloud. You're going to get VPCs. You're going to give VPCs out to your departments or people or individual engineers even, just like you would with the public cloud. Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. Well, listen, Todd, I'm going to wrap it up there. You are a busy man running a growing company. We appreciate the time, really appreciate the insights. Again, like the nuance of how the market's evolved is really interesting to us. So we very much thank you for the time today. Thank you for the learning. And, folks, if this is a space that is interested for you, definitely get in touch. So Todd, with that, thank you so much for the time. We'll wrap it up. Yeah. I definitely appreciate it. Sorry, it's the Friday, like I mentioned before, it's a Friday afternoon for me. So I might have been going a little bit like this. No, you were great. It was good stuff. So folks, with that, we're going to wrap it up and we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to The Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.